The pilot whose plane crashed at Shoreham Airshow, killing 11 people, has been cleared of manslaughter by gross negligence. Andrew Hill had been attempting a loop manoeuvre when his Hawker Hunter jet exploded into a fireball 4 years ago. Well, the prosecution claimed he had a cavalier attitude to safety and was flying his plane too low. But the jury unanimously acquitted him. Relatives of the victims wept in court as the verdicts were returned. Our correspondent Sarah Campbell is at the Old Bailey for us this afternoon. Sarah.
Well, Ben, Andrew was a fast jet pilot with the RAF. He was also a captain with British Airways. In court, fellow pilots described him as calm under pressure, never reckless, and someone with whom I would trust my life. And yet, on the 22nd of August 2015, the plane he was flying crashed, killing 11 men. Mr. Hill, when he spoke outside court earlier today, said he was truly sorry.
1,295 days ago, I lost control of an aircraft, resulting in the deaths of Maurice Abrahams, Dylan Archer, Tony Brightwell, James Mallinson, Matthew Grimston, Matt Jones, Daniele Polito, Mark Reeves, Jacob Schilt, Richard Smith, Mark Trussler. A number of people were injured. I'm truly sorry for the part I played in their deaths, and it is they that I will remember for the rest of my life.
Well, Mr. Hill said he had no memory of what happened either before or during the crash, which happened almost 4 years ago now. With all the details from this 8-week trial, here's Tom Simons.
It was the worst airshow crash since the 1950s. The jury heard weeks of technical evidence about flying before clearing Andrew Hill. The 11 men who died were all on the busy A27. Some had come to watch the flying, others were just passing by. They included a veteran chauffeur, friends out cycling, workmates heading home. Daniele Polito died not knowing that he would become a father for a second time.
He has 2 little boys that he will never see grow up, and they will never have that daddy. And it's just so cruel. There's something that could have been avoided, which seems quite obvious that it could have been avoided. It's just caused so much destruction to so many people.
Jacob Schilt and his friend Matthew Grimstone had been on their way to play for their football team, Worthing United. Jacob's parents were heading to the game too when there was a call from a teammate.
He said there's been a terrible accident, planes come down on cars on the A27, and we think that Jacob and Matt might be in it.
From the beginning you thought this is absurd, you know, my son's being killed by a jet fighter at a display is just absurd.
Andrew Hill, ex-RAF, a British Airways captain, has always accepted his flying that day was poor. His cockpit ended up in a field. He was badly injured and, crucially, he had no memory of the flight. No memory of being hundreds of feet too low during the fatal loop. He said he must have been physically affected by something. This is the home of the British Aerobatic Academy. In the back seat, instructor Adrian Willis teaches pilots from all over the world. One thing they learn, how to cope with G-force, the extra force on the body in tight turns. He asks me to recite a nursery rhyme while pushing us through 6G. That's 6 times the Earth's gravitational pull.
Humpty Dumpty had a great pull. Humpty Dumpty. All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put a whole thing together again.
I'm briefly unconscious because the blood has been pulled from my head. But fighter pilots have special equipment and training to deal with this. Vintage aircraft are incredibly popular at airshows. They can attract young people to careers in aviation. They keep history alive.
But these planes are not flown by the RAF. They're operated by companies and charities. And Shoreham has raised big questions about safety. This air display team currently can't fly aerobatics in airshows over land.
And after years of concentrating on protecting the safety of crowds at an air show, now regulators are looking at the risks to people in surrounding areas.
At the end of the day, we have to be hugely sympathetic to what's happened, and due process needs to take place, and we expect that regulations will change, and it's our duty as trustees, custodians of these aircraft, to work within those regulations that are put before us and continue as best we can to display these heritage assets to the public.
And the families bereaved by this tragedy plan to keep the pressure on. They'll play a major part in the forthcoming inquests into the 11 deaths. Tom Simons, BBC News.
And some of the family members of those who died were visibly upset in court when the not guilty verdicts were returned. In the last hour, the parents of Matthew Grimstone, who was 23 and on his way to play for a local football team, released a statement saying they were devastated with the verdict. Sue and Phil Grimstone add, why are we allowing any form of aerobatics to be performed when there's now doubt concerning any pilot's ability to avoid becoming cognitively impaired from the normal G-forces experienced during an aerobatic display. Understandably, the families still have many questions, some of which may well be raised again during the inquests, which are due to start later this year.